Hello, in today's refresher video, what we're going to do is use trigonometry to find the missing side of a right triangle. So for starters, what I did was I created a legend which has opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse, and I color-coded the acronym SOHCAHTOA according to the colors I chose for each word. So the first step that I like to do when I'm doing an example like this is I like to color code my triangle. So looking at example 1, I see that the letter V is on my hypotenuse side, which I decided was pink. So I'm going to color code it pink. And I know that 41 is really close to my angle 21, right? I didn't have to travel across my triangle to get there. And when a side is close to the angle, we call that adjacent. Adjacent means next to. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight that yellow, just like my adjacent word is yellow. So I see that I have a hypotenuse and I have an adjacent. So I look at my acronym and I have yellow and pink. So I go to cosine because it's adjacent over hypotenuse. So cosine is going to be the trig function I use. So I write cosine and I open a parenthesis for where I'm going to put my degrees equals a fraction. I always like to write the bones of the problem before I start filling it out. So what goes in here is the degrees, so 21. Okay, and then I follow along to this ratio. So it says adjacent on top, so I go to my yellow, which is 41, and hypotenuse on the bottom of the fraction. So my hypotenuse is V. It's currently unknown, so I'm going to write V right there. Now, one little trick I like to do is when the letter is on the bottom, right, of my ratio, what I'm going to do is switch them. So in class, I would always say switch or multiply, and then you guys would all tell me switch, because when the letter is on the bottom, we switch. So here, instead of writing cosine 21, I'm just going to write V equals 41 was not involved in the switch, so it stays in the denominator. And then cosine 21 is all moved down. So the whole entire term cosine 21 moves down to the bottom of my fraction, and the letter V goes on top. So now I grab my graphing calculator, and I write 4. And remember that a fraction means divided by. So I write 4 divided by cosine of 21. Okay, and I want to make sure that my calculator is in degrees, so let me do that one more time. Four divided by cosine (21), and I get that V equals 4.28, which I can just round to 4.3. So what I did was I found out that the length of my hypotenuse, V, is going to be 4.3, and I will highlight that the same color as the hypotenuse so that it's clear. Now, if you're following along with writing down these notes at home, I highly encourage you to color code. It's the way that I like to do these problems. So now we're going to go ahead and do example 2. And again, I'm going to use the same method of color coding my work before I start the problem. That helps me clearly see which ratio I should use. So looking at this one, my theta is 30 degrees. That's where my angle is. And I see that the position of X forces me to travel across my triangle to reach it. So when I travel across my triangle, that is called opposite, right? Because it is the most opposite side from this angle. So X is going to be green opposite. Okay. and 65. Now I think, is this going to be a hypotenuse? Is it going to be a side? Well, we remember that the hypotenuse is the one side that does not touch the right angle. So because this 65 touches the right angle, I know that it is a leg, right? So it is adjacent, not a hypotenuse. So I'm going to highlight that yellow for adjacent. And I'll just label it with the letters as well so that it's super clear. I'll just put op. And here I'll put adjacent. Okay, so I look at my fractions to see which one uses the green color and the yellow color, right? Opposite and adjacent. This one is opposite and hypotenuse, so I don't use sine. This is adjacent and hypotenuse, don't use cosine. This is opposite and adjacent, so I'm going to use tan for this problem. And again, I'm going to write the bones of the problem first. So tan, open a parenthesis, this is where my degrees are going to go, and then a fraction line. So I will now fill it out accordingly. So the degrees go here, and my degrees on this problem is 30, right? And the top of my fraction is opposite, which is x right now, right? It's what I don't know. And the bottom of my fraction is adjacent, the yellow side. So that's going to be 65. Now, something again I would say in class is, okay, the numbers on the bottom, do I switch or multiply? And when the number is on the bottom, you just multiply. So what you're going to do is multiply both sides by 65. That way this one cancels off, and I'm just left with x equals 65 tan of 30 degrees. Now I type that in my calculator just as I see it, so I'm going to type 65 tan 30, and I get that the value of x equals 37.52. So I round it to 37.5. And now I know that the length of the opposite side from 30, the green side, is 37.5. So I'm going to highlight that green. And that is how I solve for the missing side. Now just to wrap up the video, when the variable or the missing side is on the bottom, I switch their spots and it becomes a division problem. When the number is on the bottom, I simply multiply both sides by that number and it becomes a multiplication problem. So those are the two different styles that you'll see, and that is how you solve these problems.